what that means is, I think, very difficult for customers to decipher, because it's very hard to figure out how one vendor is excelling versus another in this field right now, because they're all saying in their press releases and keynotes a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
That keeps us all busy on this panel, and that keeps customers busy to do rigorous evaluations. And we could get into what some of the components of that are.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, and welcome to Analysts Gone Wild. We're into the new year, gents, and we got a great team here. What episode is this, Sam? 38, 58, 98?
You are the one who can keep count of the episodes. I think it's 43 or something, 43, okay. 44.
So, Robert Kramer with More Insights and Strategy. We have some great people here with Charles, John, and Sam. Why don't we just go around the horn and introduce ourselves and then see where it goes. So, Charles, tell us a little bit about yourself, how the year's going.
Hey, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Sam, for having me on. Charles Brennan here with Nucleus Research, global provider of technology research and advisory services, really focused on ROI. Going to get into the value of a lot of topics here today. And as we were talking prior to the show, 2025 was crazy, and I assume 2026 will be the same, if not more. So really excited to be here today, talk with you guys, and continue this conversation. Thank you.
John Reed, Diginomica co-founder. We've been doing this for 14 years. Hard to believe sometimes for me, but we're a media analyst hybrid. We're really focused on the realities of transformation. I spent the holidays mostly knee-deep in AI research. I know that sounds like a horrible holiday to most people. So I either have a serious problem or I'm a visionary, one or the two. It's probably the first, though. But anyhow, I did get a certification out of the deal. But now I got to regroup and figure out this whole planes, trains, and automobiles thing again, because that's how, we really, figure out what's going on the ground. And so, get ready for the misadventures and the photo shoots with Sam Gupta on site, which is always fun. So,
what did you get your certificate in?
Machine learning for project managers. Basically, it was an online thing.
Nice.
Okay.
And it put me through my paces, man. I had to build linear regression models in Excel, which is like,
wow.
I'm not a Python programmer, so I couldn't do like the really fancy stuff. But anyway, that was my holidays, guys. Maybe I really need to get a life. I know that, but don't rub it in, okay?
We won't. So, Sam, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to be nervous in disagreeing with John now. He's certified. And Charles.
Certifiable more than anything. But,
Charles, we don't have any ROI jokes planned on the Gupta ERP channels for this year. So you have nothing to worry about. And the same thing is for John ERP as well, John. But glad to see you guys here.
It's unlimited. So there's no need to write about it anymore.
A quick question for you guys. Do you, and I cover data and ERP and supply chain, do you all feel that the technology is to a point where it might be a little bit further than the adoption that the customers are having, and we got to pause a little bit and focus a little bit on the customers and what they need to do to get up to speed? Because it seems to me, when I look at all these stories and I look at everything on LinkedIn and I listen to everybody, it feels that there's a gap where the customers are not at the same level as the technology.
Yeah, and guys, we are at maybe 42, episode right now, and there is no change in Robert right now. He always brings back to change management adoption. You have to talk about change management adoption.
You do. So tell me, how do we keep on releasing new technology when the customers haven't adopted the old technology?
I love it, man.
So I had to do an end of year.
Thanks.
I did like a kickoff actually with another video event, not as good as this one, but
you had
of course.
To say that.
But they asked me like what was sort of the watchword for last year, and I said it was the gap between vendors and customers on this technology, and I called it the "what the heck do I do" dilemma. Where customers that I talk with across vendors mostly liked what they were hearing. It wasn't that they didn't like it, but they just really didn't understand what to do next. Like, what the heck do I do was really the prevailing question. And I think vendors really missed a lot of opportunities to help with that, and maybe they'll do better this year. But one of my big things is like that I keep telling vendors is quit selling change and quit selling AI and just start educating people, because you don't have to sell it.
Yep.
Everyone is bought in. They want at least to understand it. So just shift the tone and start getting under the hood and educating people instead of these, magical agentic demos that don't tie into what we're dealing with today. So that's kind of what I say.
100%. I think it's more of a consulting approach rather than anything
Yep.
these days. Yeah, I could not agree more, and I've seen that be a big issue. And I know we'll get into this in the announced some AI agents, but definitely in the supply chain field, I've noticed, that's transportation management, warehouse management, planning more. I think it's a little bit more advanced, but most customers have an appetite for it. They have yet to, find that use case where it fits their need right away, and that's where I think it ties back into that consulting approach. And if companies come in and say, "Hey, what are your biggest issues right now? What are workflows that we can potentially automate or just streamline with these, AI tools?" I think that just creates a better conversation. Because John, like you said, the people are bought in. They just need to understand where they can allocate resources, right? It's always an ROI. It's always a value thing. So I'm seeing that 1,000% in the supply chain space.
And sorry to distract from the stories, Sam, but if I could just add one more thing, which is I prefer to see folks go even higher upstream with customers than that and start with how do you want to compete in your industry.
Sure.
in a totally vendor agnostic conversation. Sure. How do you want to be effective going forward? How do you want to serve your customers better? How do you want to be more strategic? How do you want to have better products and services? Start there and then get into the technology conversation. And and by the way, don't always throw the most expensive, risky, unproven technology, agentic AI, at the problem at hand. and then maybe we're good, So anyhow, on we go. Now let's talk about agents. LOL.
Well, I think the problem is not a tooling problem; it's a data problem. So I think that this all comes back to, we've been talking about it all year, Sam, and right. I do talk about change management a lot because, you can't. Nothing if you don't have the infrastructure set up, how do you expect it to work? So there's a lot, and Charles said something really great, that it's about the really the consulting team, and about that putting the program together to have that success, because it does come down to that. All right, so we'll get into the first story, which is Beroe integrates DataHub with MCP. So what they announced is its DataHub procurement intelligence repository is now MCP enabled. So AI agents, LLMs. So John, you can probably help us out with this a little bit with your past certificate that you so happily announced on the show, and access Beroe's procurement data via its consistent method rather than one-offs. So guys, is this something that helps? Does it matter? What do we all think? What's the impact, Charles? On customers, the industry?
Well,
challenges
earlier is data has been the biggest blocker in terms of thinking about AI decision making, and then this is where this announcement comes into play. Context, data access. Most tools today, what I have found are quite impressive at things like summarization, but are still weak at the real time decision report due to the lack of reliable data, that structured data. Ultimately, the business context data that I think is really valuable in allowing these tools to make better decisions. So, I mean, this is from my perspective. I think this is needed from what I'm hearing from customers, and a lot of vendors have been investing in things like model context protocol. So, no, I think this is a good announcement for the procurement space, and I mean, let's just see how it does in terms of customer adoption. But in terms of access to quality data, this is a good thing.
So on MCP, I'm fairly bullish on MCP in the long run.
Sure.
The thing about MCP that's important to think about is it's less about agent to agent, though potentially could be used for that. It's more about standardizing how we pull as Charles alluded to, data out of systems that is crucially important for the context of our agents. And so MCP essentially making that a lot easier to do. It's good to see customers investing in standardized protocols, this one from Anthropic, because if you can standardize around protocols, it's just so much better. And that's always been a bugaboo in our industry, having too many competing protocols. And I would say this sentence I think is really interesting, where it says, they say that's the difference between a tool that just summarizes an email and an agent that can make a business decision. MCP is a foundational step in how enterprise AI will evolve. So the point being that what we're going to see this year is a lot less emphasis on those kind of boring generic use cases like email summarization and job description, and much more contextual stuff that matters to businesses. And I think that's a welcome development. But the one thing I do want to flag in this release that concerns me a little bit, that gets back to our first point, is they say by connecting to MCP, we're adding an intelligence layer to AI systems, providing hard data and domain context in a secure, structured, and future-proof way. I just want to flag that security in MCP context is a serious issue. And if you do some research on this, you will see that it is a pretty immature protocol along those lines that actually runs the risk of linking deterministic, non-deterministic models to highly privileged accounts through layers of new code that might be vulnerable to prompt injection and or things like poison context, so to speak. So I'm not saying that these particular vendors like Beroe haven't done their homework on that, but this gets back to my point on education, which is I would have liked to see a little bit in the release acknowledging that MCP opens up new threat vectors, but we're on top of it, and we have that built into how we're serving up MCP. So instead of just saying it's secure, tell us why it's secure, because out of the box right now, it's not secure.
So, John, one follow-up question on that. So, I don't know if you have seen any sort of commercial stories right now with the security concern that you have mentioned. I don't know how visible that is. I know you talk about that a lot. I don't know whether I have seen in previous shows or in one of your stories. But maybe talk a little bit more about the security concern that you are highlighting, because right now, when I look at the market, this, in my mind, is more of a catch-up story. If you don't have MCP right now, then I'm probably going to have concern about you, whether you are a real deal. So everybody has to have that, but talk about the security concern a little bit more.
Okay. Well, look, like I said, I'm not saying that Beroe hasn't done their homework. I would like to assume that they've done all the security measures that make their MCP systems quote unquote secure. But basically what you're talking about is you're allowing agents pretty deep access to pretty privileged information, and you're essentially providing them with a kind of credential, but agents can sometimes be fooled. And the notion of prompt injection is perhaps persuading agents to divulge things that they wouldn't normally divulge. And you can try to put up guardrails, but we've seen again and again that there's ways around those guardrails by querying the system different ways, or you can inject potentially hostile code into a prompt. And perhaps that could become part of the context that is served up to a user. So the way to think about it is not to get all scared and like run for the hills. It's just acknowledging that this is a new area of potential exposure to your data, as well as a potent use case builder. And I'm all for it, but you need to make sure you've done your homework there, and that's all. And I just get a little bit bothered sometimes because MCP, but we don't talk about what a secure implementation of MCP really looks like in practice.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. And I don't know, I mean, if you would trust humans more or agents more. In my case, I probably would not trust humans as much.
But the difference, Sam, is that MCP can provide access to so many different roles and accounts at the same time if you're not careful, and that's a superpower that most humans inside of systems don't have. But yes, you're absolutely correct that one of the main security vulnerabilities in enterprises is human error as well. But that doesn't mean that agents are secure just because humans are insecure. It's not an either or; it's a both. By the way, on my show later today, my month in review, the guest is Louis Columbus, who's been writing about agentic and AI security for ERP and SCM over at VentureBeat for several years in a row. So perhaps you would like to come to that show, Sam, instead of hijacking your show with this conversation further.
I'm more than happy to hop on. I mean, Lewis is amazing. I mean, he's so insightful. Robert, over to you, I guess.
So, I mean, Sam, tell me, what do you think this sits in the technology stack, and why do you guys think it's so important?
So in my mind, when I look at this, and if you want to develop any sort of commercial use cases based on your agentic workflows, the kind of point John was trying to mention, you have to have MCP.
No, the Beroe. Where do they fit in the technology stack? Not MCP.
Oh, like their category or the.
Why is Beroe? Why is this? I get the whole MCP thing for sure, and I agree with you that it's a big deal that they have to have it. But where do they fit in the overall technology stack? That we see this as a meritable story?
Yeah. So in my mind, if I look at the enterprise software categories, and obviously Charles, chime in here because obviously you track supply chain a lot more as well. But I would see them in the maybe SNOP, maybe inside that SNOP category, from the procurement intelligence perspective. I don't know if they have their own data. Again, Charles may have a lot more intel there. But this is going to be some sort of, decision intelligence that they have. And I mean, there are some use cases here. For example, let's say if you have the spot price of copper and Chile, that is going to be more of the tailored LLM, the way I would see this. But again, I don't know whether they are going to be dependent upon some other external data sets. They have their own network to be able to produce this intel or insight. But that's the sort of bucket I would see them belonging to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You're right. I think think along the lines of SAP, Ariba, Coupa, certain type of procurement intelligence layer like that. Very much working along, like you mentioned, supply chain, ERP as well. But it still requires that integration layer there too. So, but yeah, that's my take on it.
To the best of my understanding, they're not executing procurement transactions, which would make them a little bit different than Ariba in that context. And I actually like decision intelligence as one of the best sort of AI. You could say whether it's agentic or assistant or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter to me. I think it's one of the best use cases because it doesn't require certainty in all output, but it can still really support your decision-making processes. And it probably reduces some of the MCP risk as well, because you're not going to be able to execute transactions, with this type of scenario. But I really like what they're doing here. And, I suspect that this is going to reap dividends for them down the road to really try to. Essentially, what you're doing here is you're trying to make this these systems a lot more accessible and easy to use than they historically were. Where you were trying to dive into these systems and dig out insights, whereas now it's supposed to feel a lot more like a conversation, and that makes it accessible to more people.
Okay,
Not agree more. Yeah.
All right, let's move over to Certinia, I guess that's how we say it, the winter 2026 release, which was focused on AI agents, dynamic playbooks, faster quoting. This release highlighted many different things that I just kind of mentioned, but some of those are AI-powered customer account summaries, AI prompt configurations, operational features that they have from an estimating role, multipliers for quoting, revenue UI, customization, time card, some Salesforce marketing, cloud integration, which I think is pretty interesting as well. What do you guys think? How does this impact, as we talked, Charles, you were mentioning impact. How does this impact the vendor? What does it do for the customers? Does it do anything for the industry?
I mean, yeah, sorry to cut you off there, but the way I see it, I say, we were talking about, summarization earlier, prompt assistance, configurations and whatnot. These are very much the low-hanging fruits of these AI agents, right? Not really getting into those, think about manufacturing processes. But I think, in my opinion, they're a bit behind in terms of their development. Obviously, this is good for their customers. Still, they need to take that consulting approach and understand where these agents can be beneficial for their customers. I think that's very important. But I'm waiting for the day where maybe AI agents and these developments aren't really press releases. It's more table stakes conversations where customers already know that they're there, and maybe that they're doing some other developments in what areas. But like I said, I feel like this has been seen before, and this is low hanging fruit that probably should have been done a couple months ago. But not bad overall for the customers.
So Certinia is actually a client, so take that disclaimer at heart. But I will comment briefly because there's things I like and don't like about their positioning that really, I think I would say, regardless of that. But one thing to think about is that they've evolved considerably as a finance SaaS solution operating on the Salesforce platform. I'm currently more bullish about agentic services on bigger end-to-end platforms. And I'm not just singling out Salesforce. It could be any end-to-end platform. I think it's easier when you have a broader scope because essentially you can share the agentic context across a lot of different functions and services. Where customers will want to keep an eye on Certinia. Certinia has done a lot with professional services automation. Now they've been getting more into what they call their customer success cloud as well. That's newer, and that's interesting to see how those different pieces fit together. Will they deliver more value? One thing I will point out, and it's up to everyone to decide who's going faster and slower. I think some of that is, specific to various customers and industries. But what I like about some of the releases that I see this year is much more task and role specific things like, they call it a work plan or whatever to eliminate friction in resource scheduling. Resource managers can now take direct staffing actions, or you can go, there's another thing around, I think, canceling contracts. I remember listening to a podcast the other day. It was a guy, Ed Zitron, reviewing CES, and he was pointing to some functionality like this on the enterprise side and saying, that's just not sexy enough. And my whole thing is like, okay, yeah, it's not sexy in a big AI context because it's not going to make you trillions of dollars. Yep. But I actually think solving those granular problems to make specific workflows more efficient is what a lot of vendors should be going after to kind of build momentum for more ambitious plays. And so I like those granular things. But to Charles's point, you might not get a vibe that that's like transformative value, but I still think it is important to do that. The catch is you need to do both. You need to figure out how to create a big excitement around what you're doing, but also show that you have really that deep domain expertise as well.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with John, and I'm more of the fundamentals guy, to be completely honest. Okay, so any of the basic stories is probably very exciting for me. I'm not too bullish on very transformative stories, especially if they don't have any sort of content substance behind them. In this case, kudos to these guys because I don't see a lot of stories from them. So I'm glad that they have done something here. By the way, I mean, their market is being disrupted at this point of time. The way I look at it, especially in the services ERP market, is how I would define this. So when you compare them with players like Workday, now they have fairly sophisticated financial module, and they can be positioned as ERP in the services industries. Okay, 90% of the AI native vendors, I don't know how closely you guys have reviewed them, but they are fairly sophisticated as well. So my interest would be how these guys are going to respond. Obviously, until they are part of the Salesforce ecosystem, they have very unique advantage for them. But again, their market is being disrupted at this point of time, as far as I can see.
I mean, do you think that the some of the vendors, not these guys, but other ones, are trying to just play catch up for the customers to be on par? And that's when you said some of them are not really announcements that you think are mainstream that should be even talked about and more marketing.
Yeah. So in this particular case, I guess, I mean, this is an AI agent story. It's not completely fundamental. Obviously, they have to develop the features as well. But I don't know, I mean, how to respond to your question, Robert. I mean, I like the story.
No, not this story, but I was talking more in general. In general, do you think vendors are specifically playing catch up because they see stories like this or they see other stories and they just have to put something out? Or do you feel that they're true?
So in my mind, I think I look at it more from the market direction perspective. I don't pay as much attention to the story itself. So if everybody is moving towards AI agents and MCP, if one vendor is not doing that, I would probably have concerns with that specific vendor because they are not moving in the right direction. From the story perspective, how they communicate, it's totally up to them. I like to read between the lines. I mean, that's just me.
So just to be clear on this, Robert, like I believe that just about every vendor, enterprise software vendor, feels sufficiently disrupted right now, and they are trying to differentiate to the best of their abilities. What that means is, I think, very difficult for customers to decipher because it's very hard to figure out how one vendor is excelling versus another in this field right now. Because they're all saying in their press releases and keynotes a lot of the same things. That keeps us all busy on this panel, and that keeps customers busy to do rigorous evaluations. And we could get into what some of the components of that are. But like, so for example, like I'm a QuickBooks customer, and they have a lot of embedded AI features. So they could say, oh, we've embedded AI across our platform now, and it would be true. I happen to think their AI features are mostly pretty bad. And they're not helping me very much. But I'm only one customer. Like there may be another customer that feels very, very differently about that. And so that's the situation I think we're in right now across a lot of these products.
I don't think the vendors know what AI features the customers need because the customers aren't up to speed 100%. And just, so they release to say they might save 1,000 new agents or whatever they have, and it's supposed to help with the customizations or to help, to specific industries, et cetera. But at the same time, I don't think the customer's data, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, is at a level where they can take advantage of and understand what they need. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I completely. And to your point earlier as well, I think it's a mix of both. What Sam was saying, that this is where the market's going. AI agents, if you weren't developing them, that would be a major concern. But I also think that they're, from a marketing perspective, you're alluding to, Robert, a company saying they have 1,000 agents, or at a conference they release 300, whatever the number is, right? I think that then forces other software vendors to be like, okay, if we're not also developing these tools, if we're not doing the same things, developing the same agents, we're going to fall behind, not knowing exactly what their customers are looking for. So once again, tying both of those in, it's really kind of walking that tightrope. But from my perspective, that's what it seems like.
Do you all think, and last question, we'll go to the next subject. Do you think that I don't think the customers are interested in the features and the capabilities as much as they're looking for outcome-based approach or impact-based? Do you think that they're looking for more of platforms to use versus the features and capabilities? Because then the platforms have their needs, but it's not as massive as you look at like all these enormous amount of features and capabilities that are solution based from the vendors. Or do you think that we're not there yet?
So, Robert, the reality is that, customers don't know what they don't know. It's not that they know what they want, and that is how technology adoption curve is supposed to work. Whenever any new technologies get launched in the market, some people are going to try. They don't know what they want to get out of those technologies. They are trying those because they are early adopters. But as such, it takes some time for any technology. And that's the state that we are in, from the AI readiness perspective. Once these guys develop some sort of use cases, they communicate that to the market that, okay, they are getting some sort of tangible ROI, then other people are going to probably follow. The state that you are mentioning at this point of time from the customer's perspective, those challenges are always going to be there. Yeah. I don't think there is a real solution for that because they are very people-centric. And people-centric issues, yes, sure, you can put some governance controls around that, but as such, people are people; they don't change.
Well, I think it's really interesting when you talk about outcomes because go back to my QuickBooks example. What my outcome is to spend as little time managing that as possible. because that's not how I'm delivering value for anyone but myself, right? And ironically, a lot of my manually configured classification rules are what is delivering value to me. And what I fear in the future is that a software vendor like QuickBooks will hide that from me and force me to go through an agent to ask me to set up stuff, and an agent won't get it right. So I think a lot of it is thinking through outcome across multiple spheres. But Robert, to your point, these press releases would be a lot better if every single announcement said which customers they co-developed the agent with, so that you knew we built this working with customers because we know our customers wanted this. I think that would be really refreshing. And
I like
I'd love to
that
see
too.
more press releases like
point.
that.
It's a really good
Yeah.
point.
That's a great idea.
These get too hypey and too features and capabilities where the customers, they don't even know where it fits into their spectrum, and it gets complicated. Like if you said it was developed for this and by this customer or this domain to do this, I think it would come across a little bit better. But they're trying to make it sound like it fits everything, and I don't think it does. I'm not talking about the last announcement, just in general. Customers are very challenging. Sam, you know this for sure. And they need a gift wrap. And if it's not gift wrapped, it doesn't make any sense. That's why I was going towards the platforms. Because if you just, all you do is tout features and capabilities, customers aren't going to be as interested. But if the platform takes care of their needs, but then there's features in those platforms, that's a different story. I just think we're going there. So Sam, maybe in 6 months you'll agree with me. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
Maybe.
6 months.
Maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Not today. But so let's go to the next one. We talk a little bit about ECI Software Solutions acquiring Amper Technologies. They acquired them. It's an MES vendor. So, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, and basically focusing on real-time shop visibility. This is going to be more inside of the vendor, ECI, versus having them to rely on partners, which I think is a good thing if I'm correct. It's in line with the consolidation trend that we're seeing with ERP vendors and trying to put forth what I'm calling platforms. I think that the real challenge will be getting everything integrated, change management, as we always talk about, and really that AI compatibility and also credibility. What do you guys think about this story?
In my opinion, ECI, you were talking about a consolidation. They've been acquiring companies over the past few years quite heavily. So, manufacturing execution, I believe, has gotten a bit of a facelift recently. Typically for those semiconductor medical device organizations, those large enterprises that could invest more into those manufacturing shop floor tools that gives them the visibility to those workflows and, human data, whatever that may be. So I think bringing these capabilities in-house just allows these small to mid-sized manufacturers, whether it's process or discrete, to take advantage of these tools rather than relying on Amper technologies outside of the ECI platform perspective. So as you mentioned, right, that integration and change management is always the $1 million question with these acquisitions. And, that timeline always remains to be seen. But I think from like a logic perspective, ECI growing its business, I think that this is a logical move and really bringing these tools to these small to mid-sized businesses that often didn't have the resources to invest in them, right? They just relied on pen and paper to get these manufacturing shop floor processes done and fed back to the ERP. It's more high level financial planning and whatnot. So I think overall this is good, but as you mentioned, change management integration, we'll see how that goes and if there's some synergies there. But I think overall concept is great.
Great.
Agreed. And Robert, I would just add to your data point here, a great example of like the importance of MES data can't be overstated. Yep. And historically, these MES systems were siloed. And the tragic problem there is that that's some of the most important data in these entire manufacturing companies. And yet it wasn't easily accessible. And a lot of it is machine data, of course, but it's critically important in the A of kind of AI operations. You have to have that. And so I welcome that these so-called silos are being broken down finally. But to Charles's point, the integration is everything. But one thing that stood out to me is a couple of these, assuming they get the integration right, there's a list of how this would strengthen ECI's manufacturing suite. And two of the examples, smart scheduling, sequencing jobs automatically, and live machine insights capturing uptime, downtime, scrap, cycle. the things I liked about that is that it's real time. And so much of what we need to do in business now is in the moment, and not like asking an agent later what the hell just went wrong, but actually spotting it and flagging it and tracking it in real time. And so I love to see that push towards real time, which is not easy. Even though it's a cool buzzword, it's actually really, really tough to derive real time actions and insights.
Doesn't this have to happen for a manufacturer to go full scale with an event-driven system? I mean, how do you not have this inherent in the system? I mean, you're only going to be picking up this data manually or through another system and then pushing it back. You have to have it. And then as you get to this event-driven system at some point in time in the future, you're going to be focusing a little bit on Industry 5.0, which I talk about a lot. And Sam doesn't either like it or he doesn't get it because he doesn't know anything about it.
I don't get it.
Well, Robert, just real quick, one way of thinking about this is that there's preliminary things like predictive maintenance that are not real time, that are a way that you can get started with this data without the stakes of making real time adjustments, but it's still pretty powerful. I'm just saying that real time is where the real action is. But to your question, I don't think that's where a lot of manufacturers are at right now, even though it sounds logical that they would be. How many shop floors are state of the art right now?
That's why I said really only those large enterprises that can afford that. Most of those small to mid-sized manufacturers, as you mentioned, they are still leveraging those, legacy processes and somehow still getting the job done. But that's why they're at where they're at. They're not.
Well, John's point on MES is you can start with maintenance. You don't have to go 0 to 100 out of the gate. You can go 0 to 10. Start with maintenance. Figure out where you're estimating where these machines are going to go down at some point in time where you have to fix them. I mean, it's very important for that to happen, and then to get into grabbing that data to bring it back and making predictions and to help out with your entire system with this data. I think it's essential. I always say, I'm not sure if you agree, Sam, if you switch from one system to another and you're using 50% of the system today in your old system, and all you're going to do is do the same thing again, what's the point? I mean, you have to be prepared to basically eliminate your mind of what your processes are right now and be open to new processes to take advantage of technology that's going to help your company be a differentiator in your technology that you have. If you don't want to do that, then you're just doing manual, recording of information in a system. So to help keep your records so you can, do your tax returns. I don't know.
So Robert, I mean,
that was a lot of babble, but what do you think, Sam?
Yeah. So if you were looking at this more from the lenses of just the technical replacement, right? Those things would be far easier. Generally, enterprise software categories that we have, they go through a lot more enterprise software politics, is how I like to define. And MES as a category has a lot more politics than anything else. And this is not the first acquisition I have seen, from the MES perspective that an ERP vendor has acquired. Obviously, they all want to talk about how cool they are from the Industry 4.0 perspective, or how much they understand manufacturing. But, if you get into the real politics of the MES enterprise software category, people need to understand that every single hardware vendor out there is trying to get into MES market. And there is a reason why they are trying to get into MES market, because they want to control. They want to make sure that these manufacturers are going to buy machines from those hardware vendors. So now, if you are going to have push from those guys, and we are talking about companies like Rockwell Automation, we are talking about Siemens, right? Those are big deal. I mean, they are not like small players that you can compete with. So now the choice that customers are going to have, do they buy MES from ECI, or do they buy MES from Siemens or GE or Rockwell Automation? Now, obviously, they need to make them happy as well, because they are buying their machines and nobody understands what happens inside those machines. And then you have like 10,000 different hardware protocols that you have to comply with. So here, the commentary is, hey, I can connect to anything. That's not how these things work. Okay, sure, you are going to have a dependency underneath, most likely you are probably going to use something like Ignition or maybe other platform that is going to have the protocol connectivity. But generally, these vendors are trying to create barriers. Every single one, hardware vendors, that you will not be able to communicate with my machine effectively if I don't want to do that. So again, that's the political aspect. So this is great, but how effective ERP vendors are, or how successful they are going to be with MES is going to be a question. In the smaller market, I will agree with you guys. These guys don't have, as much integration money, IT maturity that they can be successful. So maybe they want one suite where they can get everything. But, if you look at larger categories, it's a lot more political argument, I would say.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And from my perspective of the market, those leading vendors are, like you said, not only providing the software, they're providing the hardware and that industrial IoT, data platform. So you're getting that information, and then obviously you have the MES and the physical hardware. So I mean that it is quite a moat some of those organizations have, and they have obviously the funding and the market capitalization to keep investing, into those capabilities. But I think it's a good opportunity for these small companies, but once again, there's a large barrier between the small companies and those large, enterprise level manufacturers.
So Robert,
All right. Anything else on this topic?
No. So Robert, we have some comments. So we have Alex. He's saying crossing the chasm, and I don't know which one. I think he commented on something, we missed it. But thank you so much, Alex, for that comment. And then Anders is saying, I have certainly seen instances where what people want from their ERP is to take their existing horrible processes and perform them efficiently. And Anders, you are the only one who can do it. I guarantee this. Any more comments on that?
No, whenever you reevaluate your existing systems, that's healthy. And but I would urge people to not just try to make their processes better, but rethink them and in a modern industry context with all the things we talked about up until this point in the show. But it's a healthy discipline for sure, and more companies should do it.
Yeah, perfect. So Robert, do you want to go to the next story then?
Yeah, we can do that. Pipefy.
Okay.
U.S. availability of AI agents via the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI. Do we think this is impactful for the customers? I think it is, based upon it being available in the marketplace and basically the outcomes that we're going to see from the customers. Does this differentiate them at all? Does this? What's the credibility that you guys all think this offers? Or is it just another announcement saying that we have our agents? What do we think?
In my opinion, I think this is really a good opportunity for Oracle customers to take advantage of some third-party, AI tools. Right? I think they've developed a lot of AI agents and AI in just general at Oracle, but I think having the opportunity to, expand that horizon with some third-party, providers is always beneficial. Once again, we'll see how that relates to the customers, what outcomes they get. But I think providing more tools is a good thing, and that's where the market is going. Once again, I think organizations need to understand how these can potentially fit into their current operation. But it's more availability in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it will be interesting to track from a vendor perspective, because ultimately I think buyers more and more, they want to buy into what Robert said earlier, platforms, ecosystems that are healthy. They don't want to have to consume everything from the vendor of record, but there will be tension points there. And I've seen in almost every enterprise vendor some tension with partners and third-party providers building agents where they're not always happy sharing the data and the platform in every case. And I think vendors need to be really careful about that, because customers are going to get annoyed and pissed. But I understand what the sensitivity is, right? Because if you become like the vendor, even if you're smaller vendor than Oracle or whatever, where your customers are interacting with these agents and getting things done, then it does create tension points for the vendor itself on strategy. So, I think it's something to look out for. But I really like what I see when I see a healthy ecosystem like this and offering things beyond what the bigger vendor offers.
Sure.
Yeah, so some great points, guys. And in my mind, when I look at Pipefy, they are probably going to be one of the most exciting vendor at this point of time from the AI native ecosystem alliance perspective. And obviously, they are doing a lot of work with Oracle at this point of time. And I wonder if Oracle is going to acquire them or who's going to acquire them. Maybe ServiceNow, maybe Boomi. I don't know. That could be a possibility. But this is going to be a very interesting market. Right, Charles?
Yeah.
So in this particular case, and again, what they are doing, I see this as more of the low-code, no-code development platform. And consulting companies are developing IP on top of this. So they have very strong partnerships. And again, they are aligning with Oracle in this particular case. So overall, I think it's going to be really exciting. I think they are going to become really big. In my mind, and I don't know if there are any sort of competitors who are doing similar things. There are many of them that are doing infrastructure, some low-code, no-code as well, but I don't know if they are as developed as Pipefy at this point of time.
I do want to pick a bit of a nit with the press release. I don't think the press release has much meat on the bone at all.
Yeah.
And it says it's the ISV Award Winner of the Year, which is a pretty impressive honor, and I couldn't figure out why. And I went to the website, and I continue to have trouble figuring out what it is they did that was so cool. And I'm sure it was cool. So why not tell us what you did? I eventually found a blog post that started to get into some of the low-code, no-code automation features as well, and talking up enterprise-grade governance in a single environment, secure operational structures, orchestrating critical systems, autonomous agents applying contextual logic. And I was like, wait, where's that stuff in the actual release? Why did I have to go digging for that deep on your website? So I would suggest maybe beefing up what you're doing, because it looks like what you're doing is pretty good.
Yeah, and the way I see it, John, the reason why they might be, ISV Partner of the Year is because they are probably driving the most business, and they are probably the most exciting. I think consulting companies are really developing a lot.
So say it. Tell us why. Tell us why. Tell us why.
That is not something you say it, I guess.
Oh, are you kidding me? If I'm leading if I'm their CMO, I'm putting that in there. I'm saying why I won, not just that I won. What does that even mean? I won. Okay, what did you win? What did you do?
Yeah.
Well, I think we got one comment, Sam. I don't know if you want to pull that in.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. I'll read it, and then you guys can respond. So here, Rahaf is saying, listening to this live, one thing stands out clearly. Enterprise platforms keep getting faster, smarter, and more automated. Yet leadership frustration does not really go away. So Robert, this is your favorite topic, I guess. From what I am seeing, the gap is in the system, and it isn't the employees either. It's what happens between the signals these systems generate. And I think he's talking about event-driven. So somebody is agreeing with you, Robert, today. And the decisions leaders make with them when visibility arrives late, even the best system looks like it failed. I shared a recent post about how executives often blame, and I think there is some more comment that we are not able to see, I guess, in this. Any comments in this? No?
Well, what do you think?
I mean, obviously, I agree with this one. And Robert, that would mean that I'm agreeing with you. I don't want to do that openly on the show.
Thanks.
You know this. But obviously, this is a real problem. We all know this. Yeah.
Can I just say real quick, the only thing I would push back on a little bit is that I'm always wary of reducing the enterprise to one causal variable. And sometimes actually it is bad legacy systems that are causing a lot of problems. And sometimes, while I don't say it's the employees, it can be how the employees are trained, compensated, promoted, and treated that is a major source of your problem. So I would not let those things off the hook. And also, it's not just about decisions executive makes with visibility, although I think that's very important. It's visibility also allows a lot of transactional things at the employee level to go a lot better too, right? It's the where is my stuff problem. That's not a decision maker and decision issue. That's an employee responsiveness, customer facing frontline issue. And so I'm agreeing with the visibility thing, but I'm saying it goes beyond just decision intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to also the processes. I think that these companies don't want to change. So I do think it's mostly the companies that have the problem because it's too much of a major. It's like a move. If you're going to move across the country, is how big of a deal is that? How much of a change is that? Do you want to do that? It sounds nauseating. Changing on an ERP system is much more drastic than a move. So, because every process you do, and then it also looks into when you look at your processes, you want them to be more efficient. So you're not looking to do it the same way you've always done it. You're looking to do it better. That means that people's jobs are at stake. You're bringing AI into the mix. You're talking Industry 5.0. You're bringing MES into the mix. You're looking into your supply chain a little bit further. You're looking into event-driven architecture. So, yeah, it's gonna hit every component of your business. But the name of the game is these companies need to be successful. So I do advise that they tackle this because they're going to need to at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like when you go to shows, guys, like how many times do you meet like a team that came to conference that appears to be firing on all cylinders? The leadership gets it. The various people seem on top of their game and can articulate the transformation strategy of the company, what they're trying to get done at the conference and all of that, and seem really energized. So often you see people who are burned out or who are just trying to solve a problem in a very discrete area. And to this commenter's point, I think that's where you start to fall down is like, where's the leadership? Where's the vision? Where's the drive? And you just don't see it that often. And that's amongst the people that go to shows. And that's not probably that's even of itself the more active, portion of your user base. So the lesson is change is really hard.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Rockwell expands. They're going back and talking a little bit more about MES, but they're expanding with their elastic MES. So this is a kind of an interesting discussion in how this compares to what ECI is doing, but they're touting it as more of a modern MES system, flexible, unifying IT and OT for scalability, for connecting the shop floor, obviously, to the cloud, features like embedded AI and the edge, et cetera. Does this unify their platform a little bit more? Does this give their customers more features? What does elastic actually mean? Is it a buzzword or is there an actual feature that they're getting? What do we all think?
For me, and guys, obviously correct me if you think I'm wrong or have a different opinion. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that facelift, the MES space is going, underneath where typically these are old legacy systems on-prem. Think about AI in terms of compute elasticity. You need the cloud for that. So I think where vendors like Rockwell and others are investing into their cloud infrastructure, I don't necessarily see this being a large game changer. I think that's where the market's going. I think that's necessary. That's about proven itself, whether ERP, supply chain, to work quite well. But in terms of AI, that's where I think elastic MES comes into, and that capability from a compute standpoint. And you need the cloud to do that. So it's a facelift necessary for a legacy vendor like Rockwell.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what to do with elastic. I guess it's a nice change of pace from flywheel and agile. So now we got elastic systems. I guess when I think of elastic, I still think of things like rubber bands. Maybe that's too rudimentary for this. Obviously it's the right ambition, right? I mean, when you read about cloud native interoperable MES platforms, with a modular approach, that does sound like where you ultimately want to go. Then the hard work begins of customers figuring out, how does this go? How do I migrate to it? What are the timetables? What is the transition like? What are the benefits? All of the fine print. But as a statement of intent, I think it's a good one, and I do like. This is the first press release we saw that included some data. Granted, it was data that they did themselves, but they talk about the manufacturer leaders citing integration as the top internal obstacle. So you have a little bit of data cited in a press release. I find that nice, but let's see. Let's watch Rockwell try to charge into the future in an elastic manner.
Yeah. So guys, from my perspective, and I don't know how closely you guys track this, John and Charles, from Rockwell perspective, some background about them. They acquired a company called Plex and Plex was one of the best ERP
Yep.
system, one of the most loved ERP system out there. They took sort of the MES strategy, and I had very similar impression with Rockwell as I had with Certinia. Literally for like a year after the acquisition, I was hitting refresh on every month that, okay, Rockwell, do something. Rockwell, move. Rockwell, do something. There was nothing happening. And I was like, what's going on? There is nothing happening with Plex. What are they doing? And they had their own MES as well. Obviously, when a hardware vendor acquires a solution like MES, their goal is going to be to sell a lot more hardware. So my impression was that maybe it has lost its identity. It's not getting as much attention in the portfolio as it should get based on the credibility Plex had. So now I'm glad that they have done something with it. Okay?
Yeah, I agree.
But the question is going to be whether the SaaS aspect of the MES, whether people are willing to buy that. There is a little tension between IT and OT. If you talk to OT folks, and again, I don't know how closely you interview them, they always say that, hey, you need to separate the network. There are different concerns. Manufacturers have different beliefs in terms of how OT and IT networks should be structured. So that belief is still prevalent in the manufacturing community. So now, if you do this in the SaaS environment, are customers going to buy that? Are they comfortable connecting machines to the internet? It's not that every single machine in the manufacturing environment is connected to the internet right now. They don't feel comfortable because they have much bigger risks. So that would be my take on the story. I like it because at least they are doing something.
Sam, can I just comment real quick? Because I had a real deep history with Plex before the acquisition, and Plex they were a pioneer in cloud manufacturing. And, they used to bring us into Detroit every year because they had a lot of automotive clients there. And they would take us to local plants every year with the analyst group. So you can still find pictures online of some of your favorite analyst personalities wearing hard hats in plants. People like Brian Summer, Frank Scavo, et cetera. And it was great, right? Because you would hang out with the customer. They would show you the facility. And they really got it, right? And my biggest concern with Plex was you're pushing cloud manufacturing. But at the time, there was a lot of hesitancy to putting full-blown manufacturing systems in the cloud, but they did something really smart. They componentized that, and they componentized their MES, and they componentized their quality system as well. So it gave them new entry points into organizations as well. And then they were acquired in 2021, and everything went away. It was silent. Nothing happened. Everything disappeared. The engagement disappeared. The customer stories disappeared. And it was like, wait, you acquired this incredibly innovative company, and you did what? And look, I'm really glad that now they're making some noise, but man, it's been a long time. That was 4 years ago.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think great background.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we got a couple comments in the comment field, and then we got to probably wrap up.
I know we have 3 minutes, and why you want to cover this comment. I get it, Robert. I mean, this is about change management, so we want to make sure that.
Jesus, I'm getting a hard time for you. I'm going to predict that the St. Louis Cardinals are going to beat the Toronto Blue Jays, in most of the games that they play next season. So just because you could be a little nicer to me today.
I think we need to have one more hour right now. If you want to analyze that, I'm more than happy to do that.
We can do it.
We can do right now. You want to do it?
No, I don't. But we can do it online next. I'll bring my data analytics of the two teams, and I'll get back to you. I got some feeds directly from Major League Baseball, so on Google's on Google Cloud platform that they can send to me that I won't give you, but I'll be ahead of you on that one. So anyway, I'm teasing. All right, so I live by the Washington Commanders because I live in Virginia, so I keep them close to me, but they had a bad season. So anyway, let's wrap up. Charles, what do you got going for the weekend? Anything inspirational you want to give us for this year that you want to tell us?
Putting me on the spot here, but I think in terms of motivation, urgency is key. I think that's from all parties, whether you're a software vendor, customer looking to drive change within your company, whether you're a salesperson looking to get more sales, urgency is key. So I think that's what I'm living by this year. In terms of this weekend, I got in a biking accident over holiday break, so pretty happy with that. No, everything's good. So getting back into tennis and getting back 100%. So staying active and getting ready for another big week as an analyst.
Great. What's your next trip?
Next trip is later this month. I'm going to Seattle for the Acumatica Summit. I don't know if any of you guys will be there, but so see you guys there. It's always good seeing you guys in person. And Sam, looking forward to shaking your hand one day in person as well.
Yep.
John, how about you?
Yeah, well, I think Charles summed it up. I mean, this is not a time for complacency, and for myself as well. I'm always trying to learn more every day. None of us are the experts in these emerging things. We're all learning, and we got to stay on top of it if we want to deliver value. So we try, but I'm looking forward to Acumatica. That's my next trip, and look forward to seeing you guys there, where we will try to decipher some of these things on the ground. So let's see how we do.
Awesome.
It sounds great. I'll be there as well, and a few others in February. I think companies need to focus on their processes, because as change comes around, they're a little timid because they don't want to move forward with something new from a process standpoint. But these processes will actually change the way for them to be more efficient and be more successful, because the competition isn't going anywhere. Some of the competition is all in. They're the leaders and the first adopters, and they're doing these new processes with these new systems. And I think MES is a great example of how you can actually get ahead by implementing something like that. So look forward to see you guys in a couple weeks. Sam?
Yeah, and I think this is best ever show because it is ending, on change management note. So thank you so much, Robert, for doing that. On that note, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. We meet every Friday now at 11 a.m. So I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, team. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.